Welcome back to my YouTube tutorial. This is Mosh Dev Academy, and today we are going to look at how to create a simple login app using Flutter. So Flutter is a framework, and we're going to see how we create a simple login app using Flutter. So without wasting time, let us navigate to our search and look for CMD. So CMD stands for Command Prompt, so which provides this dark terminal. So as software developers, you should fall in love with this dark terminal. So we shall be using more of this, a dark terminal, and we are going to be writing more of commands because we are software developers. So what we want to do now, we want to create our application. Remember, we are using Flutter as a framework, and it helps us to create application by running commands, and the application we want to create is going to be available on our desktop. Therefore, the first step we do is to change our directory to desktop by running a simple command, which is cd desktop. Cd desktop, cd stands for change directory, and we want to navigate to our desktop, and then you can now click enter. You click enter to change your directory to desktop. Yes, so click on enter. Yes, okay, we are changing our directory to desktop. Sorry, let me just repeat this. So you see the desktop. Yes, you change directory to desktop so that we can see that now we have changed from our our C, and now we are running it on desktop. So at the desktop, what we need to do is to run a simple command, which is flutter create, and since we want to create our login app, we are going to call it flutter. Yes, then I will use underscore login, then app. Yeah, so I've been always saying that when you're creating a Flutter application, make sure you don't leave spaces here. So if you want to join these words, you can either use an underscore or you can join them together as one word, and make sure you have internet connected. And with that, I need you to have a stable internet. So you click on enter to run. The reason that's why we need internet, because as a Flutter application is creating, it picks some dependencies from online. Therefore, without that, it won't be able to pick those dependencies. That's why we need the internet. So after you creating your application, even if you disable the internet, everything will be okay, and your Flutter app will be ready to run and compile. So after a few seconds, you're going to realize that now it has created our Flutter application and it's available at our desktop. So if we try to close this and we open our desktop, you're going to see that our Flutter folder is here. Yeah, the login, it's Flutter login app, the one that we have just created. So you can simply open it, and you can see that it has created folders and files within here, because as we are creating it, it picked some online dependencies and everything that we need for us to compile a Flutter application. So here, let us open our Flutter app in VS Code by running cmd and then code space dot. So this command opens our project inside Flutter, rather inside VS Code. We open our Flutter application inside what? VS Code. So we can zoom in a bit so that we are able to see this, or we can even reduce, because I realize everyone can see this. Now, this is our Flutter application, the default one, and it has different folders, as you can see, and files. Of course, I'll have another video to explain the project structure of a Flutter app, but today what I'm covering is creating a simple login application for our Flutter app. So we shall always visit our lib, which is available here. We have a lib folder, and within a lib folder, this is acting as like the heart of our application, and everything we are going to do, we are going to spend much of our time in the lib. So within the lib, by default, when you create a Flutter application, it creates what we call a main.dat. A main.dat, it is a file which has already pre-made codes or pre-written codes, which are here, and they come along when you're creating your Flutter application. So you're going to realize that we have a .dat, which means as we are creating anything in Flutter, we use Dart language. So that is one of the newest languages that are on the market, but since it is supported by Google, it has been adopted by most of the developers. So here we are using main.dat. So if I want, I can also create more other file. For example, if right now I want, I can create login.dat. So anything that you're going to create here must have a .dat extension. But right now we are going not to use different files. We are going to use the default one, which is the main.dat, which has this default code. So before we can do anything, we might want to run this app to see or to be sure whether everything is okay and our application can be ready to run. Now to launch your first application, what you do, you click on this run option and then you start debugging. By clicking on start debugging, it's going to display the available devices that you can choose. Remember, we are developing a mobile application. With Flutter, we be developing mobile applications. So that what comes to your mind, you might think of now a mobile phone, because as we are developing, we must be able to compile our app onto our mobile devices. But here, among the listed options of the devices available, our mobile phone is not here. Reason being, we haven't yet configured that. So I'll have another video where I'll be explaining how to configure a mobile device. Yeah, but right now we're going to be either using Chrome, Edge, or Windows. And then there are others where in those instances where we can use an emulator. But for now, we are not going to use all this. Let us go by Chrome, which one of the option we can go with. And anything you're going to see on this Chrome web browser, it's going to be depicting the same picture how it's going to run on your mobile device. So don't worry. Let us first choose Chrome. As beginners, we can first use the available options. So we are using Chrome to run. And you can realize that right now it is running in the background. Yeah. For the first time when you're running your Flutter application, it might take some 2 to 3 minutes because it has to compile all the different dependencies that your application needs to run. So you can be patient a bit, and also as developers, being patient should be part of us. So we have to be patient. It is running in the background, it is compiling, and it is making your application ready to launch. So you can see that after some few minutes, it has successfully loaded, and now we are giving it just few seconds to ensure that everything is ready and it can display our first application, as you can see. Yeah, so after a few seconds, you're going to realize that it can now, okay, sorry. Oh, I need some internet, sorry. So you're going to realize that with this, okay, I had some internet disconnections. So I'm going to run my application again. Let me run it once more. I run it once more. So we are going to realize that it's going to build and it will be able to display. It's going to be able to display what? Our application, and it's going to show it in the browser because we chose Chrome as our default device that we are using. But very soon in future, we are going to see how to connect mobile device and we are able to run our app using our mobile phones. Yeah, so you give it some time, it's launching and it's going to display the application here. So it's launching and it's going to display the application within our Chrome. So we give it some few minutes. It's about to finish. Okay, and yeah, boom. So let's see. So it is making everything ready, and yeah, you can see that right now we have our application here. And by default, when you create a Flutter application, it creates what we call a counter app. It's a counter app because when you click on this floating button here, it keeps on incrementing the values here. As you can see here, we had 0 and right now we're at 8. We can click up to 14, 15 and whatsoever. But right now today, this is not what we are covering. What I want us to cover is very simple. I want us to cover now how do we create a login screen using what? Flutter. So by default, we are going to use the same main.dat, but what we are going to do is to remove everything within our main.dat. so that now we can create our own what? Our own application. So what are the steps to create a login app or a Flutter application? So the first thing you do is you need to import. What do you need to import? Always you need to import a material design package. What is a material design package? This material design package provides what we call ready-to-use UI components. For example, the buttons, the input fields, and the layout. And without this input, without this line of code, you cannot use material app, you cannot use a scaffold, you cannot use text field, you cannot use columns, etc. So we're going to see all this, but just know the first step to do is always to import your material design. And where is it available? You just simply use the import, then you use app. Okay, let me first disable this because it is picking. Okay, I want to write everything so that you're able to see. So we use package, yes. Okay, we use package, and then we use this. So it is available at package flutter material.what.dat. So this is where it is available, and that is the first step. So after finishing this, the next step you do is to use what we call the void. You're trying to create a void, which is like a main entry point of any Flutter application. So this line of code you're seeing, it acts as like our main function, which is the entry point of the app. Yeah, so where the main, this line, it acts as the starting point of every Flutter application, and within the main, in the curly braces, you can make use of what we call the run app, which is a built-in function for Flutter. And this one, it tells Flutter to start the app and load the my app, which might be a widget. So it's not always that we shall be using my app, but for now, let's first use my app as a class that we shall use. And then, so when we create this line of code, it is acting as our entry point of the Flutter application, and we make use of the run app, which is a built-in function which always loads our application. So we have created this object called my app, but we need to create a class for it because it's going to be that my app that we are going to execute. So for us to create that class, we call our class, which is a reserved keyword, and we pick my app, which is the class we are inheriting up there in form of object, and we use one of the basic principles of programming, or the programming principles. Remember, therefore, that is encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction. And what we are going to use now is what we call inheritance, and we need to inherit every property, every class and attributes of the stateless widget. Yeah? So we're going to use what we call a stateless widget, and this stateless widget, it is a class. Remember, we have different widgets. We have a stateful widget and a stateless widget. Now, the reason as why we are using a stateless widget, it's because we do not want to store any state in the UI. So our UI is going to be fixed, but later on, as we advance, we are going to see when to use a stateful widget, when to use other categories of widgets. But for now, just know that we are using a stateless widget because we are going to make our screen to be static. It's not going to accommodate any state. That's why we are using this the stateless widget. Now from there, the other thing you need to do is to override. Yeah, you call your override, because by default, on line 1, when you go back here, we imported our material design, and this material design, it picks from this material.dat, which is a file, and this file has got what we call classes and object plus other functions. So when you import them here, they come along with everything which is inside here, and we don't want it to disorganize our class. Yeah, this is equivalent like in your HTML, where you declare your padding to be 0 and margin 0 when you're defining your CSS classes. So it's equivalent to this, that we want to override everything that comes along with the material design, so that now we are in control of every state within the application. That's why we override. Then from overriding, the next step you do is to pick your widget, which is a class. So you call your widget and use a build function. There is what called build function, which picks two attributes. One being, now these are parameters, sorry. We pick parameters, one being a class being build context, and then its attribute, which is context, and then you apply curly braces. So what we are simply doing is, we are using a widget we call a build function which picks two parameters, one being a class and then the other one being context and its attribute. Then from here you return, what you return is what we call the material what? The material app. You return a material app. So you return a material app. Now the reason that's why you need a material app, it's because it defines the structure of the entire application. Yeah, this material app defines the structure of the entire application, and within this you can define two attributes. You can first of all use a debug bar. You set it to false. Now this debug bar is what is always available when you launch your application and you see something like banner debug something, the red line in your application. So if you want to return it off or to remove it, you use the debug show checked mode and you turn it to a false because it's a boolean, and then thereafter you're going to set your home, which is a widget, and we want by default always to make our login screen, the one we are going to create, to be our default screen that is going to be available every time we launch our application. So to re-explain this, we have created our class which is extending everything, or which is inheriting everything from a stateless widget. Yes. Then from there we have defined a material app which defines the structure of the entire application. We have removed a default debugger toolbar which is always in the application, and then we are using our login screen to set the login screen as the first screen to be displayed. So we have created this, but we need to create it as a class. So after this, you're going to jump outside this code. Yes, you jump outside that code and you create a class, and the class we are going to create is a login screen. So every screen you see on your mobile application, it is treated as a class. So each time you want to create a screen, you create it as a class. And also this class is going to extend a stateless what? A stateless widget. We are still using stateless widget because we are making everything to be still easy, because we are just beginning this journey. We shall cover more advanced codes, but right now you still create the same other class, and this class we are creating, it's because we want to inherit it here as it's going to be our default screen that is going to be displayed. So we use this class login, and then it is going to extend what? A stateless what? A stateless widget. Now from here, the other thing you do is to override. So make sure you override. Yeah, you override. So you override. When you override, you still come back to pick the widget, which is a class, and use a build. We are simply almost duplicating the same code we have done here. Yes, and it's a function which picks two parameters, one being a class build context, and then the other attribute being context. Then you attach the curly braces and you return. Now, benchmarking on what we have earlier designed here, we have returned the material app, which is like the controller. This one, the material app, defines the structure. So here, since we have already defined the structure, on the second screen or on this login screen, we shall not return a material design, but rather we are going to return a scaffold. Yeah, we return a scaffold. Yes, after returning a scaffold, within the scaffold, that's where now we define, within the scaffold, that's where now we define the different attributes that we want. So within the scaffold, what we are going to do is, we need now to call our attribute, which is a body, and it's from a widget class, and we are going to use center because we want to center align. We want to align every content within the application or within the screen at the center. So we shall pick that center. Yes. So after calling our center to ensure that all the content is centered on the screen, we need to add some padding so that we can add space around the child widget. So therefore we are going to call one of our attributes, which is going to be child. Yeah, and it is from a widget class, and then we use a class called padding. Yeah. So we use a class called padding, and within the padding we can now make use of, so we use the padding and then we make use of what we call the edge. So you see that as we are writing, it keeps on suggesting there's what we call the edge insets, which sets all, or it gives you options to add what we call some inline. There would be inline styling, and we are going to add some 20 pixels padding on all sides. So we are going to set 20 pixels. This side we just set 20.0. We don't say 20 pixels, we just say 20.0, and it is adding what we call a pixel. Yeah, it adds what we call a pixel. Then from there, what we do next is we shall also still call another child, and we need to add what we call a column, because we are going to have like a column display within our elements, the text fields and the buttons, we want to display them as columns. Yeah, so within the columns you can make use of what we call the main axis size. The main axis size, what it does, it prevents the column from taking the full screen height. Yeah? Instead, it adjusts based on the widget content. So instead of occupying the entire screen, when you use this class, it ensures that it wraps your content to fit on your screen, and you're going to use a class called main size .mean, yeah, to ensure that you control the behavior of your screen. Then from there, what you do next is to call your children, which is also an attribute, and it's from a widget class, and it is going to accommodate what we call array, because within here, this is where you want to display your text fields, your input fields, and your buttons, and you pick them as an array, because here you have defined the column, which was a child, so this one is picking a single element. But within here, since I want to declare multiple elements, I'm using another attribute called children, and I can now pass the different children that I want to have. For instance, I might need some icons to beautify my design, so from the icon class, which is one of the classes that Flutter provides, this is equivalent to our normal icons that we know, which is the font icon in HTML, and we can use an icon which is a lock. Yes. Then we can set its size. Yes, we set its size. We can set its size to be, let's say, 80. We can set its size to be 80. You want to ensure that it's big enough to be seen. Then we use color, and from color there is a class called colors, not color. There's a class called colors dot, and then you can specify the color you want to use. So I might go with blue. Yes. Then from here I put a comma. Now I might also need to apply some SizedBox. Yeah. I use this SizedBox, and I'll set it to 80. Reason being, the reason as why I'm picking the size, I want to add some pixels of the vertical space before the next widget. Remember, I want to have an icon at the top, then I want to have below the icon, I want to set my widget, which will be now my text input. So that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm adding the sized what? I'm adding this SizedBox to have 20, meaning it will leave space between the icon and the input field. So to add this input field, which is going to be our input, our email field, we use what we call a class is known as a text field. So we have different classes to use, but for our case, let us use a text field, and we can add some decoration here, which will use what we call the input decoration, and within the input decoration we can specify the label the label text, and our label text is going to be email, because I want us to have the email. Then from here I can also provide the border, so that the borders are going to be we can use some borders, and the borders are going to be outlined input borders. Yes. So you can see that we are progressing and we are building something here. So what you have done here, you can just benchmark on the same, and then you simply copy from here, as you can see, up to here. Yeah, you can copy this, you put a comma here, and then you paste it down. You paste it down, and then you simply change this one to password. Instead of email, this one is going to be password. Yeah, leave everything in lowercase apart from the first letter. So the password, for it might have a different design. The password, it might have still the same design. Yeah, and then from having the password, The other thing that we are left with is to create what we call our button. We are left with creating a button, which we might use an elevated button. There are different buttons that we can use, but for our case we might go with an elevated button. Okay, an elevated button. Then from this elevated button we can make use of this and then to this. So you pick this child, and then the child is going to inherit what we call a text, because you want the button to have a text. Okay, so a text, and it's going to be maybe sign. Oh, let me call it log into your account. Log into your account. Yeah, so this button is going to be log into your account. And yeah, so you can see that if we go back, let me just explain this before I run. So we have first of all imported, these are the steps we have gone through. We have imported our class, which is package material.dat, which provides the material design so that you're able to use the buttons, the text field, the widgets, everything that you need to use has been provided by this package. That's why our first line of code is to always pick this. Now what we have done next is to create the entry point of the application, which is done using this line of code, the main. We use the run app, and then you specify which app. The app we are creating, it is as a result of defining our class here as my app, and this one is acting as like the root of our application. So we defined our class here using the reserved keyword class, and then we have named it my app, which we have performed an inheritance by inheriting every attribute and classes within the stateless widget. The stateless widget is a class, and it has default functions and attributes that we have picking. Then we override this because we want that with our material design we are picking and everything we are inheriting from this stateless widget should be silenced so that we are in control of everything that we are going to use. So we use the widget, then we use the build, and the build picks these two attributes. It picks the class, which is build context, and an attribute context. Then we return, in the first place we have returned the material app, which acts as like the structure. It structures the design or the application content on your screen. Then from there we have defined our debug bar, because we don't want that debug bar. We have set it to false because it's a boolean, and we have set our home to always pick the default screen, which is going to be screen. The login screen we want it to display always whenever we launch our application. So it's going to be our first application, rather our first screen to display. Now since we have created this one as an object, it means that we need to create a class. We have defined a class on line 14, and it is also still inheriting from stateless widget. We repeat the same procedure of overriding and then building this. So what I might explain is, now we return a scaffold. A scaffold is like the content wrapper. It is equivalent to your container class in HTML. When you want to design, you define the container to wrap everything on your screen. And you have defined your body to have a center alignment so that your content is centered. We have applied some padding to add some spacing. We have used a column because we want to display our elements in a column format. Now we have used this maximum main axis size, so it defines the screen size so that the content does not overlap the screen. We have used the children here so that we can define the content within. You can see that every content that we wanted to display has been defined in the children here. We have used an icon class, which is available within Flutter. We have used the SizedBox because you want to have some space between the elements. For you to create your next widget, we need some space. So when you use the SizedBox, it creates that. Then we have used the text field to define our input field, one being the email, then the other one being the password. And we have used an elevated button. And you can see that this button, it is using an on press as of now. I might not explain this, but in the future I'll explain why we need the on pressed, because later on these buttons are going to be functional so that when we click on them they can do something. Then we have used the child to define the text, which is a widget, and then it can apply a text onto our button. So I think everything is ready, and since everything is ready, we can now launch our application to see the results. So when you're launching, make sure you have internet, because as it's building it might need some internet. So you start debugging. You can start debugging to see your results in the device that you specified, and the device we specified here was Chrome. So therefore we can now launch this. We can launch this. So you give it time because it is building, it is compiling, and we are going to see the result in our Chrome. So we can see whether we have successfully created our login application. We are going to see that we have created our login application. It is still taking its time. Yes, it is taking its time. And yes, so we are here. So it's running. If we have prayed and everything is okay, we shall be able to see our results in the browser here. So let us hope we have prayed, and if so, we are going to see. So we are just waiting to see. Boom, you can see now we have our we have our screen here. You see this is our login. We have these input fields and have this button, login to your account. But you can see that we need to add some space between the login button and this text field of input. So what we can do, you can simply just copy this code, copy it, then you can come before the elevated button, you can add this, and then you save. Now by default, Flutter has what we call a hot reload, where it does not require you to first stop the application and run again. As you run in the first place, soon as you make any change to your VS Code, when you save, it applies that hot reload, which automatically refreshes your page to ensure that it adjusts with all the edits that you have made. So it makes update to your screen, and you see that you see everything that you have done within your VS Code. So you can see that we have successfully created our login application and everything is okay. So I would love to stop from here. So you just wait for me in our next video where we shall be covering a lot. Thank you so much. I remain Mosh Dev Academy. Okay.